I've watched enough families to know that blood doesn't always mean belonging. You can share a roof with someone for months and still feel like a stranger, waiting for permission to exist. The ones who get pushed out aren't always the troublemakers. Sometimes they're just the ones nobody chose to keep. I knew a boy once who learned that too young. The lock clicked from inside. Not a slam, just a small sound metal sliding into place. Final. He stood on the porch with a bag over his shoulder, listening to his aunt's footsteps move away. 3 days ago, her new husband had said it was time to choose. She chose. He was 14. The street stretched empty in both directions. A woman across the road glanced at him, then pulled her curtains shut. Down the block, a man loaded groceries into his truck without looking up. His hand found the watch in his pocket, his father's watch, the only thing left. The metal was cold against his palm. He started walking, past the hardware store, past the diner with the cracked window. At the corner, a faded notice fluttered on the community board. Yellow paper, torn edge, house for sale, $5, as is. The address led him to a house on the far side of town. Peeling paint, dead garden. A pickup truck sat in the driveway with a for sale sign taped to the windshield. He knocked. The man who answered looked at him once top to bottom and held out his hand. $5. No questions. No paperwork. The boy placed the crumpled bills in the man's palm. The last of what the pawn shop had given him for his father's watch. The man pulled a key from his coat pocket. Rust flaked off as he dropped it into the boy's hand. "It ain't a real sale," the man said. "Can't sell property to a kid, but nobody wants that place. County's been trying to tear it down for years." He shrugged. "You want to live there, that's your business. Just don't come back here asking for anything." The door closed. He walked. The houses thinned out past the gas station. Pavement crumbled into gravel, then dirt. The last mailbox he passed had no name on it. Just 3 bullet holes rusted orange at the edges. After that, nothing but dead grass and a tree line in the distance. His feet ached. The bag cut into his shoulder. Wind pushed against his chest, steady and cold, carrying the smell of wet leaves and something else, wood smoke. Maybe. From a farmhouse he couldn't see. The house appeared between 2 bare oaks. 1 story, wood siding the color of ash. A porch that sagged in the middle like a tired spine. He stood at the gate for a long time. The key turned with a grinding sound. The door swung inward on its own, hinges screaming. Inside, darkness, and a smell wet wood. Old smoke, something dead or dying beneath the floorboards. He stepped through, his eyes adjusted. A single room, maybe 20 feet across. A window to his left, glass shattered, wind pushing through. A corner that might have been a kitchen, once blackened marks on the wall where a stove had stood. The floor groaned under his weight. He found the corner with the least wind, dropped his bag, sat down with his back against the wall. This was it. This was home now. The cold crept in as the light faded. He pulled his knees to his chest, listened to the wind, listened to the house settle and creak around him. And then something else, a sound from the far corner, the dark one, behind where the stove used to be. Not the wind, not the wood settling. Breathing. Rats. Had to be rats. He told himself that as he pressed his back harder against the wall. The sound faded. The wind took over, whistling through the broken window, pushing cold air across the floor in waves. He didn't sleep, just waited for morning with his eyes open, watching the dark corner until gray light finally crept through the cracks. Nothing there, just shadows and an old gap in the wall near the floor, big enough for something to squeeze through. He stuffed it with dried grass and tried to forget about it. Day 2. The roof leaked in 3 places. Water dripped onto the floor in a steady rhythm that matched his heartbeat. He found wood scraps behind the house, rotted, splintered, but better than nothing. It took him 4 hours to wedge them into the gaps. His hands bled from splinters by the time he finished. The patches held. Barely. Day 3. The well out back had water. He discovered it by accident, tripping over the stone rim hidden in the tall grass. A rusted bucket hung from a frayed rope. He lowered it down, hand over hand, arms burning from the effort. The water came up brown at first. He let it settle in an old pot he'd found inside, waited until it looked clear enough to risk. The first sip made his teeth ache so cold it hurt going down. But it was water. He could survive on water. The forest nearby had dead branches, dry enough to burn if he could get a flame going. He dragged armfuls back to the house, stacking them against the wall. No matches, no lighter. He tried rubbing sticks together the way he'd seen in movies. His palms blistered. Nothing happened. Day 4. The food from his bag ran out. Half a sleeve of crackers, gone. A bruised apple, eaten down to the core. He skipped dinner. His stomach cramped for an hour, then went quiet. A different kind of cold settled in deeper than the weather. Emptier. Day 5. He walked to town. The hardware store owner shook his head before he even finished asking. "No work here, son." The diner manager looked past him like he wasn't there. At the grocery store, he lingered near the day-old bread rack, trying to work up the courage to ask if they had anything they were throwing away. The owner appeared from behind the counter, thick arms, apron stained brown, eyes that looked right through him. "Out. I was just wondering if—" "I said out. This ain't your place." The words hit harder than a hand would have. He walked out without looking back. The door chimed behind him, a cheerful little sound that meant nothing. The walk back took longer. His legs felt heavy, disconnected from his brain. The wind had shifted, coming from the north now, carrying something colder than October. The sky had turned the color of old iron. By the time he reached the house, the first real wind of winter hit. Not a storm. Not yet. But a warning. The kind of cold that found every gap, every crack, every piece of skin not covered. He sat in his corner, pulled his knees up, wrapped his arms around himself, and squeezed. The shivering started in his jaw, spread to his shoulders. His whole body shook against the wall, vibrating like something trying to shake itself apart. He could leave, walk back to town, find a church, a shelter, somewhere with walls that kept the wind out. And then what? The same looks, the same closed doors, the same message. Spoken or not. You don't belong here. You don't belong anywhere. At least the house didn't tell him to leave. The wind screamed through the broken window. The patches on the roof held, but cold poured through a dozen other places he hadn't fixed yet. His fingers went numb first, then his toes. His ears burned, then stopped feeling anything at all. This is how it happens, he thought. This is how people disappear. Not with a bang, just slowly, in the dark, in a place nobody remembers exists. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, just to stop seeing the darkness. His body kept shivering, automatic, beyond his control. Somewhere around midnight, or what felt like midnight, the sound came again. From the corner, the dark one, behind where the stove used to be. Not scratching this time, not the quick skittering of a rat. A moan, low, weak. The sound of something that had been holding on and couldn't hold on anymore. He stopped shivering, stopped breathing. The moan came again, longer this time. A thin, broken whine that rose and fell like a voice trying to form words, but forgetting how. Not a rat. Something bigger. Something alive. Something that had been in this house the whole time, hiding in the darkness. Waiting. Or maybe just dying. He stared at the corner. The blackness there seemed thicker than the rest of the room. Solid. Like it was hiding something on purpose. His hand found a piece of wood from the pile. He gripped it tight, knuckles white, even though he couldn't see them. The sound stopped. Silence heavier than before. The wind paused. The house held its breath. Then, from the darkness, 2 points of light, faint, reflected, looking right at him. Eyes. He didn't move. The eyes held steady in the darkness, 2 pale points, unblinking, fixed on him like he was the threat, like he was the thing to fear. His grip tightened on the wood. His heart knocked against his ribs, loud enough that whatever was watching must have heard it too. The cold, the hunger, the exhaustion, all of it vanished. Only this remained him and whatever was hiding in that corner. The eyes blinked, dropped lower. A sound leaked out of the darkness, half whimper, half breath, weak, broken, not a threat, not a predator waiting to strike. Something hurt, something dying. He stayed frozen until dawn bled gray through the cracks in the wall. The eyes had closed somewhere in those hours, but he could still hear the breathing, shallow, irregular, the rhythm of something fighting to stay alive and losing. When the light grew strong enough to see shapes, he moved. Slow, one hand still gripping the wood, the other reaching for a half-burned stick from the pile he'd managed to get sparks yesterday, enough to char the end black before the flame died. No fire now, but it would have to do as a torch if he needed one. He crept toward the corner. The smell hit first, rot, infection, something sweet and wrong underneath, like meat left too long in summer heat. His stomach turned, but he kept moving. 3 feet away, 2. He crouched, squinted into the shadows where the old stove gap met the wall. A dog, curled against the baseboards, pressed into the smallest space it could find. Fur the color of dirty sand, matted and crusted with something dark. Ribs sharp enough to count through the skin, he could see each one rise and fall with every labored breath. One back leg twisted at an angle that made his own leg ache just looking at it. Swollen, red, weeping something yellow at the joint. The dog's eyes opened, watched him. No growl, no bared teeth, just that look, exhausted, wary, waiting to see what he would do next, waiting for the kick, maybe the shout. Whatever always came from humans, he knew that look. He'd worn it himself. Standing on his aunt's porch 3 days after her new husband moved in. Standing in the grocery store while the owner's eyes went right through him. Standing anywhere, people looked at him and saw nothing worth keeping. The look of something that had stopped expecting help a long time ago. He lowered the stick. The dog flinched. A small movement, ears flattening against its skull, body pressing harder into the wall, trying to disappear, trying to become small enough that maybe the world would forget it existed. "Hey!" The word came out rough. His voice cracked from disuse. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. "Hey, I'm not going to hurt you." The dog didn't believe him. Its eyes stayed fixed on his hands, tracking every movement, every twitch. Why would it believe him? What had humans ever done to earn that trust? He backed away. Slow steps, keeping his hands visible, palms open. Though he didn't know why it was a dog, not a person. But something about those eyes made him careful, made him want to prove he was different from whatever had hurt it before. At his corner, he stopped, looked at his bag. Inside, nothing but a quarter piece of bread he'd been saving, hard at the edges, starting to mold at one corner. The last of what he had. He'd planned to make it last another day, maybe 2 if the hunger cramps didn't get too bad. His hand went into the bag before he could think about it. The bread was stale, dry. He broke it in half, then broke 1/2 again. A small piece enough to matter, not enough to kill him if this was a mistake. He walked back to the middle of the room, set the bread on the floor. 4 feet from where the dog lay. Close enough to smell. Far enough that it wouldn't have to come near him to reach it. Stepped back. The dog watched the whole time. Didn't move. Didn't even lift its head. "That's all I've got," he said. The words felt strange. A promise made to something that couldn't understand promises. Something that might be dead by morning anyway. "I have to go find wood, but I'll come back." He said it like it mattered. Like anything he did mattered to this broken thing hiding in the corner of a house nobody wanted. The forest was a 2-hour walk. Round trip. Longer today, his legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Heavy and disconnected, moving through mud even when the ground was dry. He gathered what he could carry. Dead branches, bark strips, anything that might burn. The sky had cleared by afternoon. Weak sunlight filtered through the bare trees, casting long shadows across the dead grass. His breath fogged in the air. The cold was still there, waiting, patient. It would come back tonight. It always came back. He pushed through the door with an armload of kindling. The bread was gone. He stood in the doorway, arms full of wood, staring at the spot on the floor where he'd left it. Empty. Not even crumbs. His eyes moved to the corner. The dog was still there. Same position. Same wounded leg. Same matted fur pressed against the wall. But this time, when it saw him, something was different. It didn't look away. It watched him cross the room, watched him set down the wood, watched him move to his corner and sit with his back against the wall. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The wind pushed through the broken window. The light shifted from gold to gray as clouds rolled back in. He should sleep. His body screamed for it, every muscle sore, every joint stiff, his head thick with exhaustion he couldn't shake. But he kept looking at the corner, kept thinking about those eyes. The dog had been here before him, had crawled through that gap in the wall to escape something, the cold, a predator, the wound slowly killing it, had hidden in the darkness listening to him move around, too weak to run, too scared to make a sound. Until last night, until it couldn't hold the pain in anymore. He thought about the grocery store, the hardware store, every door that had closed before he could even ask. The dog had nowhere else to go either. "Okay," he whispered into the growing dark. "Okay." He didn't know what he meant by it. Permission, acknowledgement, maybe just the sound of his own voice reminding him he was still here, still alive, still not completely alone. The dog's ears twitched at the sound. Outside. The wind changed direction. Colder now, sharper. Winter's first real breath. In the morning, he would have to find food. Real food. Enough for both of them. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight. He closed his eyes. And for the first time since he'd walked into this house, the silence didn't feel quite so empty. A sound woke him before dawn. Soft, uncertain, movement. He opened his eyes. Gray light filtered through the cracks. The dog had moved. Not much, just a few inches closer to the center of the room. Its head was lifted slightly, turned toward him, ears forward instead of flat. And on the floor, halfway between the corner and where he sat, a trail of dark spots led across the wood. Blood, fresh. The wound was getting worse. He didn't try to get closer. Not yet. The blood trail told him enough. The wound was open, maybe torn worse from moving. Whatever had happened to that leg, it wasn't healing on its own. He needed supplies he didn't have. Medicine, clean cloth, knowledge he'd never learned. All he had was time and whatever he could scavenge from the forest. He built the fire first. His hands had finally figured out the rhythm friction. Patience. Breath on the ember at just the right moment. The flames caught. Heat pushed back the morning cold. Then water. Then food. The stream was frozen at the edges, but still running in the center. He caught a fish with his bare hands, numb fingers. 3 failed attempts. Then finally, one that didn't slip away. Small, barely a meal. He carried it back wrapped in his shirt, shivering the whole way. At the house, he stopped near the corner. The dog's eyes tracked him, wary, waiting. He set the fish on the floor, raw, whole. He didn't know if dogs ate fish, didn't know if this one would eat anything he offered. The smell filled the small room, cold water and scales and something alive that was now dead. The dog's nose twitched, its ears lifted slightly, but it didn't move. He backed away, sat in his corner, watched. The minutes stretched. The fire crackled. Outside, wind pushed against the walls, testing the patches he'd made, finding the gaps he'd missed. The dog watched him, watching it, Neither moved. Then, slowly, so slowly, he almost missed it. The dog's head lowered. Its nose touched the fish. A pause. A breath. Then teeth, pulling at the flesh, tearing small pieces free. It ate like something that had forgotten how. Hesitant, careful, like it expected the food to be taken away at any moment. He let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. The days blurred after that. He stopped counting them by numbers, started counting by other things instead. Fires built, fish caught, pieces of bread found at the back of the general store's dumpster, frozen but edible once thawed by the flames. Each day, he left food. Each day. The dog ate. The distance between them stayed the same. 5 feet. 6. Close enough to share a room. Far enough to pretend they were still strangers. Day 8. He noticed the gap in the wall near the dog's corner, the one it had crawled through that first night. Cold air poured through it, cutting across the floor in an invisible river. The dog shivered in its sleep. Even with the fire going, he found mud by the well, mixed it with dead grass until it held together, packed it into the gap, handful by handful, until the draft stopped. He didn't realize what he'd done until he stepped back to check his work. The wall near his corner still had 3 gaps he hadn't fixed. The window was still broken, covered only by a piece of cloth that flapped in the wind. He'd patched the dog's wall first, without thinking, without deciding, just done it, like it mattered, like keeping that corner warm was more important than keeping himself warm. He stood there for a long moment, looking at the fresh mud drying on the wall. The dog watched him from its spot, head resting on its paws. It didn't move, didn't react. But something in its eyes had shifted, something that looked almost like recognition. Day 10. The dog ate while he was in the room. Not from his hand, they weren't there yet. Might never be, but in his presence. Eyes flicking up between bites, checking, making sure he hadn't moved closer, making sure this wasn't a trap. He stayed perfectly still each time, barely breathed. Let it eat in peace. The wound still seeped, still smelled wrong, but the dog was eating more now, moving more. Sometimes it would shift positions during the day, not much, just enough to follow the patch of sunlight that crept across the floor. Day 12. The night came cold and stayed cold. He woke to the sound of whimpering, soft, broken sounds that cut through the darkness like small knives. The dog was shaking. Not just shivering, shaking. Its whole body trembling against the wall, the injured leg twisted beneath it at an angle that made him wince. He didn't think, just moved, grabbed the cleanest cloth. He had a piece of his old shirt, torn but dry, and crossed the room, 3 feet away, 2. The dog's eyes opened, found him in the dark. He stopped, held out the cloth. Here. His voice barely above a whisper. It's not much, but it's something. He laid it on the floor, close enough for the dog to reach if it wanted. Then he backed away, sat down, watched. The shaking continued for a long time. The whimpering faded to silence. Then, in the gray hour before dawn, he saw movement. The dog's nose, stretching toward the cloth. A paw, pulling it closer. The fabric disappeared beneath matted fur. The shaking slowed. He stayed awake until morning, watching, making sure. The fire burned low, and he didn't add wood, didn't want to move, didn't want to break whatever fragile thing had just happened. When the light came, the dog was still there, still wrapped in his cloth, still breathing. Something had changed. He could feel it in the air between them, a shift so small it shouldn't have mattered. But it did. He thought about trust, about how it wasn't given, it was built. Piece by piece, moment by moment. A fish left on the floor, a wall patched against the cold, a cloth offered in the dark. None of it was enough on its own. All of it together was something else. Something that felt like the beginning of a bridge. That night, he let the fire burn higher than usual. Let the warmth fill the room until even the corners felt almost safe. The dog slept. He slept. And somewhere in the darkness between them, the distance felt smaller than before. Day 13. He was sitting by the fire, warming his hands, when he heard it, not whimpering this time, not the labored breathing of something in pain, a different sound, softer. He turned. The dog was eating. Right there, 5 feet away, in full view, not hiding, not waiting for him to leave, just eating and watching him and not looking away. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, hands still extended toward the flames, watching the dog watch him. The fish disappeared piece by piece. The dog licked its lips, settled back down, closed its eyes. He stayed frozen for a long time after that, feeling something he couldn't name, something that felt like being seen, like being trusted, like maybe, finally, mattering to something. Day 14. He woke to the sound of breathing that wasn't his own. The dog had moved again during the night. Closer now, maybe 5 feet from where he lay. Still curled tight, still protecting the wounded leg, but facing him, watching him before he even opened his eyes. He stayed still, just looking back. The fire had died to embers, cold pressed against his exposed skin, his face, his hands, the back of his neck where his collar had shifted in the night. But something felt different, warmer, somehow, in a place that had nothing to do with temperature. He had a routine now. Wake, check the dog, start the fire if it had died, go out for wood, for water, for whatever food he could find. Come back. Check the dog again. Eat, sleep, repeat. Simple, predictable. The kind of pattern that made days feel less like survival and more like something else, something he didn't have a name for yet. Day 15. The dog ate while he was in the room, not just once, every time now. It would wait for him to set the food down, watch him step back 3 paces, then lower its head and eat, slow, careful bites, eyes flicking up between each one to make sure he hadn't moved closer. He never did, just sat in his corner and watched, learning the rhythm of it, the way the dog's ears would relax slightly while it chewed, the way it would lick its lips once when finished, then settle back down with a small sigh that sounded almost content. He started talking more. Still not real conversations, just sounds to fill the silence. Cold today, setting down the food. Found some bark that burns pretty clean, should help with the smoke. The dog would watch him, ears twitching, not understanding the words, but recognizing the voice, paying attention in a way nothing else ever had. Day 16. He noticed the dog tracking his movements now. Its head would turn when he crossed the room. Its eyes would follow him to the door when he left. Then find him the moment he came back through, like it was keeping count, like it wanted to know where he was. He started announcing himself. Just me, pushing through the door with an armload of kindling, found some dry stuff near the creek. The dog's tail moved, just once. A small thump against the floor. So quiet he almost missed it. He pretended not to notice. Kept walking. Set down the wood. But he noticed. Day 17. The wound looked worse. He'd been avoiding looking at it directly. Something about seeing it made his stomach twist in a way he didn't want to examine. But today, when the afternoon light came through the window at the right angle, he couldn't pretend anymore. The swelling had spread. Red streaked up from the joint, disappearing into the matted fur above. The smell was stronger too. That sweet, wrong smell that meant infection, meant something going bad inside where he couldn't reach it. He remembered his mother's hands. Steady, gentle. The way she used to work when his father came home, hurt from the mill a cut, a burn, once a deep gash from a saw that slipped. She'd sit him at the kitchen table and work without speaking, cleaning each wound with warm water and soft cloth, checking for the red lines that meant poison in the blood. Gentle, she'd say, more to herself than anyone. Let me see. His father's hand had healed. Every time. But that was different. That was family. That was love and skill and years of knowing what to do. This was just him and a dog, and no idea if anything he tried would matter. Day 18. He prepared everything before the sun came up. Boiled water in the pot until steam rose thick and white. Tore the cleanest cloth he had into fresh strips. Set them near the fire to stay warm. Then he waited for the light. When it came gray and thin through the cracks, he stood up, the dog's head lifted, watching. He picked up the pot, the cloth, walked to the middle of the room, and stopped, 4 feet from the dog. I need to look at your leg. I think maybe I can help, but you have to let me get close. The dog didn't move, just watched with those tired, patient eyes. He took a step, 3 feet now. The dog's ears flattened slightly, its body tensed. He stopped, waited, made himself breathe. The ears relaxed. Just a little. Another step. 2 feet. The dog whimpered a small sound, almost a question, but it didn't move away, didn't show its teeth. One more step. Close enough now to smell the infection clearly, sharp and wrong. Close enough to see individual hairs on its muzzle, some gray, some gold, some dark with dirt. Close enough to reach out and touch if he dared. He lowered himself to the floor, slow, keeping his hands where the dog could see them. Okay, he whispered. I'm just going to... He reached out. His hand trembled. From cold. From fear. From something else he couldn't name. His fingers brushed the fur on the dog's shoulder, soft underneath the mats. Warm. The dog flinched. Every muscle in its body went tight. He didn't pull back, just kept his hand there, light as breath, waiting. 1 second, 2, 5. The dog exhaled. A long, slow breath that seemed to empty something out of it. The tension faded. Its eyes closed. And it let him touch it. He worked slowly, dipped the cloth in warm water, pressed it against the wound gentle, so gentle, the way he remembered his mother being gentle. The dog whimpered, but didn't pull away. He cleaned the dried blood, the crusted discharge, the dirt that had worked into the torn skin, changed the cloth when it got too dark, kept going. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking badly and the water had gone cold. But the wound looked different, cleaner. He could see where the edges might heal if given a chance. He sat back. The dog opened its eyes, looked at him. Something passed between them. Not words, not understanding exactly, just acknowledgement. "Same time tomorrow," he said. "If that's all right with you." The dog's tail thumped once against the floor. Day 20. Someone was watching. He sensed it before he saw it, that prickling feeling on the back of his neck, like eyes pressing against skin. He was outside, cleaning the wound in a patch of weak sunlight. When the feeling hit, he looked up. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, old 60, maybe older. Weathered face, deep lines around eyes that had seen too much weather and not enough kindness. Wool coat worn thin at the elbows. He stood perfectly still, just watching. The boy's hand tightened on the cloth. The dog's ears went flat. The man didn't move closer, didn't speak, just looked at the boy, then at the dog, then back at the boy. Then he nodded. Once. Slow. Like he'd seen something he recognized. And walked away. Back into the trees. Gone. The boy sat frozen for a long time, heart hammering, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. That night, after the fire burned down and the cold crept back in, the dog moved again. Not just closer this time, all the way. It crawled across the floor, slow, painful, dragging the bad leg behind it. The boy watched, barely breathing, as it crossed the distance between them. 5 feet, 4, 3, 2. It stopped an arm's length from where he lay, looked at him for a long moment, then it lowered its head, put it down on the floor, right next to his hand. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The dog closed its eyes. After a long time, he let his fingers rest on its head, light, barely there. The dog sighed. A deep sound. Content. Someone had chosen to be near him. He stayed awake for hours, feeling the warmth of fur against his palm, listening to its breathing, steady, peaceful. Sometime before dawn, the dog started shivering, small tremors at first, then harder. He put his hand on its side, hot, much too hot. The fever had started. Day 25. The cold came like something alive. It pushed through every crack, every gap, every patch he'd thought was solid enough. By noon, the temperature had dropped lower than any day before. By nightfall, The water in the pot had started to freeze around the edges. The dog wouldn't eat. He'd tried everything: potatoes, fish, the roots he'd been saving for himself, set them right in front of its nose, close enough that it should have been able to smell them even through the fever. But the dog just lay there, eyes half closed, sides heaving with each shallow breath. Its whole body trembled, not from cold anymore, from something worse. He put his hand on its side. The heat shocked him. Not the warmth of life, the heat of something burning from the inside out. The wound had turned. He could see it clearly now in the gray light. The red streaks had darkened to purple, spreading up the leg like fingers reaching for the heart. The swelling had doubled since yesterday. Pus seeped from the edges, thick and yellow-green, and the smell made his eyes water even from 3 feet away. He built the fire bigger, fed it everything he had left. The wood he'd been saving, the bark, even the scraps of cloth too dirty to use for bandages. The flames climbed higher, throwing wild shadows across the walls. Heat pushed against his face. Not enough. The cold kept coming. The wind found every weakness, and the dog's breathing got faster, shallower, little hitches between each breath, like its body kept forgetting how. He piled every piece of fabric he owned onto it, his blanket, his extra shirt, the rags he'd been using to clean the wound, wrapped them around the dog's trembling body, tucking them under, trying to trap whatever warmth was left. Not enough. Nothing was enough. He could feel it, the heat bleeding out faster than he could replace it, the trembling getting worse, the breathing getting quicker. He was going to watch it die, right here, in this broken house, because he wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, didn't know enough about wounds or fever or how to keep something alive when everything wanted it dead, just like always, just like everything. He stood up, his legs shook. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in, the smoke from the fire filling his lungs until he couldn't breathe. He needed air. He pushed through the door into the frozen dark. The cold hit him like a fist, stole his breath, turned his skin to ice in seconds. He didn't care. He stumbled forward, away from the house, away from the sound of labored breathing, away from those eyes that trusted him for no reason at all. His foot caught on something, a root, a frozen rut. He couldn't see in the dark. He went down hard, hands first into the half-frozen mud at the edge of the clearing, then knees, then his whole body, sliding forward as he tried to catch himself and failed. He lay there, face pressed into the earth, mud seeping through his clothes, cold and wet and smelling like rot, grit between his teeth, ice crystals scraping against his cheek. This is what he was. This is what he'd always been. Worthless, useless. The kind of thing people threw away because keeping it wasn't worth the trouble. His aunt had known. The town had known. Everyone could see it, except him. Stupid. Stupid to think he could matter to anything. Stupid to think feeding a dying dog in a broken house could change what he was, what he'd always been. The mud soaked through to his skin. His whole body shook from cold, from something else he couldn't name. His hands were covered in filth. His face, his clothes, everything he had left was ruined. He lay there in the dark and the cold and the mud, and he didn't move, worthless, The word echoed in his skull. His aunt's voice. The grocery store owner's eyes. Every look that had ever passed through him like he wasn't there. Worthless. Get up! The thought came from somewhere deep. Not hope. He didn't have any hope left. Just stubbornness. The same dumb stubbornness that had made him walk to this house instead of lying down in a ditch somewhere. Get up. He pushed himself to his hands and knees. Mud dripped from his face. His fingers were numb, clumsy, barely working. Get up. He stood, swayed, caught himself against a tree trunk. The house was 20 feet away, small, dark, smoke rising from the chimney hole in a thin gray line. Inside, something was dying. Something that had crawled toward him in the night. Something that had chosen to trust him when every other human had probably given it reason not to. He walked back, walked. His legs didn't want to work. His whole body felt wrong, heavy and light at the same time, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. Mud squelched in his shoes with every step. He pushed through the door. The dog hadn't moved. Still lying there, still trembling, still fighting to breathe. The cloth had slipped off. The fire had burned down to embers. He looked at what he had left. Nothing. No more wood. No more cloth. No tricks. No plans. No ideas. Just himself. His muddy, frozen, worthless self. He crossed the room, lay down on the floor next to the dog, pressed his filthy body against its side, chest to ribs, arms wrapped around, legs curled to cover as much as possible. The dog flinched at first, then relaxed. A small sound escaped its throat, not quite a whimper. Something closer to relief. He could feel its heart beating through its ribs, fast. Irregular, fighting. Don't die. The words came out cracked, broken, barely a whisper. Please, I need you to not die. The dog's head turned. Its nose touched his cheek. Wet, cold. I need you. The words surprised him. He hadn't meant to say them, hadn't known they were true until they were already out. But they were true, truer than anything he'd said since his parents died. The fire went out sometime before dawn. The cold became total. He couldn't feel his feet anymore, couldn't feel his hands, could only feel the dog against him, the heat of its fever bleeding into his frozen skin, the rhythm of its breathing against his chest. He talked to it through the night. Nonsense. Mostly. Memories. Things he'd never told anyone. His father's hands, rough from work, gentle when they touched his hair. His mother's voice, singing in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. The way home used to smell before everything fell apart. The funeral. Everyone saying sorry without meeting his eyes. His aunt sighing when she agreed to take him. The lock clicking shut. The dog listened. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe it was too far gone to hear anything. But its breathing stayed steady. Its heart kept beating. And that was enough. When the first gray light crept through the cracks, he opened his eyes. The fire was dead. The room was freezing. His whole body ached, stiff and locked in place. But the dog was still breathing, slow, weak. But there, he didn't move, didn't want to break whatever fragile thing had gotten them through. Outside, the wind had stopped. The silence felt strange after hours of howling. Then footsteps. crunching through the frozen ground, coming closer, stopping right outside the door. A knock, 3 times. Slow. He couldn't move. His body had frozen in place overnight, joints locked, muscles seized, skin stuck to the filthy clothes that had dried stiff against him. The dog lay against his chest, still breathing, still burning with fever. The knock came again, harder this time. He tried to speak. His throat was raw, cracked from the cold and the talking he'd done through the night. Nothing came out but a rasp. The door pushed open. The old man from the clearing stood in the doorway. Gray light spilled around him, outlining his shape tall, thin, wrapped in a heavy wool coat. He looked at the room, at the dead fire, at the boy curled on the floor with the dog, both of them covered in mud and ash and dried sweat. His expression didn't change. He stepped inside, closed the door against the cold. "Saw the smoke stop last night." His voice was rough, like gravel scraped over wood. "Figured you'd be dead by morning." The boy tried to push himself up. His arms shook. He managed to get halfway, propping his back against the wall. The dog whimpered at the movement, but didn't wake. The old man crossed the room without waiting for an invitation. Crouched near the cold fire pit, started arranging the dead ashes, pulling out half-burned chunks, stacking fresh kindling from a bag he'd brought with him. His hands moved with the ease of someone who'd done this 10,000 times before. Within minutes, smoke rose from the pit, then flames. Warmth spread slowly, pushing back the cold that had settled into everything. The boy watched. His body started to thaw, joints aching as blood returned to his fingers and toes, pins and needles everywhere. His face felt wrong, tight, and swollen where the mud had dried. The old man finished with the fire, sat back on his heels, looked at the dog for a long moment. "Infection's bad," he said. Not a question. "Legs gone septic. Another day, maybe 2, it'll spread to the blood. After that..." He shrugged. "Nothing to be done." The boy's hand found the dog's fur, tightened. "I've been cleaning it. Every day. Warm water. Not enough." The old man reached into his coat, pulled out a small glass bottle, brown and unmarked, set it on the floor between them. "Antiseptic. Had it left over from a dog I used to keep, old, but it should still work." He paused. "Can't promise anything." The boy stared at the bottle. Medicine. The thing he'd needed for weeks and couldn't find, couldn't buy, couldn't beg for. Why? The word came out before he could stop it. The old man's eyes moved to him. Gray, like winter sky. Deep lines carved around them from years of squinting into wind and weather. "I watched you," he said. "That day in the clearing, you were cleaning its wound, talking to it like it mattered." He was quiet for a moment. "I had a dog once, long time ago, didn't take care of it the way I should have. It died, and I didn't do a thing to stop it." Another pause. "You're not me." He stood, his knees cracked. He moved toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the frame. "I've got work," he said. "At my place. 20 minutes through the woods, past the big oak that got hit by lightning. Nothing hard, chopping wood, hauling water, fixing fences when they need it." He turned slightly, looking back over his shoulder. "Pays room and board, warm bed, 3 meals a day." The boy's breath caught. A job. A warm place. Food. Everything he'd been trying to survive without. But the dog can't come. The old man's voice was flat. Matter of fact. I don't keep animals anymore. Too much trouble. Too much that can go wrong. The words hung in the cold air. The boy looked at the dog, still pressed against him, still fighting to breathe. Fur matted with mud and blood and things he didn't have names for. Body wasted to bone and fever. An animal that had crawled into this house to die and found him instead. He thought about warm beds, hot meals, a roof that didn't leak, walls that actually kept the winter out. He thought about walking away, leaving this broken house, this broken dog, this broken version of himself that had somehow become something different over the past weeks. The dog's eyes opened, just slits, looking up at him through the fog of fever and pain. It didn't ask for anything, didn't beg, just looked at him with that same trust it had shown since the night it crawled across the floor to sleep beside him. The trust of something that had been hurt by every human it ever met, but had decided for reasons it couldn't explain, and he couldn't understand that maybe this one was different. He remembered his aunt's door, the click of the lock, the way no one had come after him. He remembered the grocery store, the diner, the hardware store, every door that closed before he could even finish asking. Everyone had told him the same thing. He didn't belong. He wasn't wanted. He should go somewhere else, be someone else's problem. Stop taking up space that could be used for something better. The dog had never told him that. The dog had chosen to come closer, had chosen to eat while he watched, had chosen to let him touch its wound, clean its fur, share the only warmth either of them had. The dog had chosen him. No. The word came out quiet, steady. The old man turned. What's that? No. Louder now. He looked up, meeting those gray eyes. I'm staying. The old man studied him for a long moment. His face gave nothing away. It might die anyway, even with the medicine, even if you do everything right. I know. You could starve out here. Winter's barely started. You've got nothing. I know. Then why? The boy's hand moved to the dog's head, rested there, because it needs me. The old man stood very still. Something moved behind his eyes, a memory. Maybe. Or a recognition. The shadow of a choice he'd made differently. A long time ago. He nodded. Once. All right then. He reached into his coat again, pulled out a cloth bag and set it by the door. Potatoes, some dried meat, clean bandages. He paused. The medicine, use it twice a day. Thin layer on the wound, then wrap it clean. Don't let it lick the stuff off. The boy nodded. His throat was too tight for words. The old man opened the door. Cold air rushed in. I'll check back, he said. Few days. See if you're both still breathing. He stepped outside, pulled the door shut behind him. Footsteps crunching away through the frozen ground. Fading. Gone. The boy sat in the silence. The fire crackled. The dog breathed. He looked at the bottle of medicine, the bag of food. Not charity, not rescue, just a choice, his choice, and whatever came after. He picked up the bottle, unscrewed the cap. The smell hit him sharp, chemical, clean. Okay, he said to the dog. Let's try this. The dog's tail moved. Once, weak, but there. 3 weeks later, the wound had closed. Not perfectly. There would always be a scar, a patch of hairless skin where the infection had eaten deepest. But the red streaks were gone. The swelling had faded to nothing. The smell of rot had disappeared, replaced by something cleaner, something alive. The dog could walk now, not well, not straight. The leg had healed at a slight angle, leaving a permanent limp that made every step look like a small question. But it moved. It followed him to the door each morning when he went out for wood. It waited there when he came back, tail thumping against the floor, ears forward. The house had changed too. Small things. The door hung straight now he'd found a hinge in the forest, rusted but functional, and spent a whole afternoon fitting it into place. The gaps in the walls were sealed with mud and stone, packed tight enough that the wind couldn't find its way through anymore. He'd built a proper fire pit in the center of the room, ringed with flat rocks he'd hauled from the creek, with a hole cut in the roof above it to let the smoke out. Still one room, still old wood and dirt floors and a roof that leaked when the snow piled too heavy. But different now, warmer, fuller, like something had decided to stay and had started making room for itself. Mid-December. The worst of winter had settled in short days. Long nights, cold that made the trees crack like gunshots in the forest. But there were moments, scattered between the hard parts, when the sun broke through, when the light hit the snow just right and everything turned gold and white and almost warm. Today was one of those days. He sat on the porch. Not much of a porch, just a few planks he'd nailed together over the sagging foundation, barely wide enough for two. The dog lay beside him, head resting on its paws, eyes half closed against the brightness. The snow had started to melt in patches. Dark earth showed through here and there, like the ground remembering it existed underneath all that white. A bird called somewhere in the trees, the first he'd heard in weeks. A crow. Maybe. Something that had survived the cold the same way he had. He looked at his hands, calloused now, rough. The skin cracked at the knuckles, stained with dirt and ash that wouldn't wash out no matter how hard he scrubbed. Not the hands of a 14-year-old anymore. The hands of someone who'd learned to build fires and patch walls and clean wounds. Someone who'd learned what it took to keep things alive. The dog shifted beside him, lifted its head, looked at him with those same eyes that had watched him from the dark corner all those weeks ago. Then, slowly, it moved closer, laid its head on his thigh, let out a long breath. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, feeling the weight of it. The warmth bleeding through his jeans. The trust in that simple gesture, complete, unguarded, earned through nothing but time and consistency, and showing up day after day when it would have been easier to leave. Something in his chest shifted. Something that had been tight for so long, he'd forgotten it was there. He put his hand on the dog's head, felt the fur soft now that he'd been washing it when the weather allowed, felt the skull beneath, solid and real, felt the life humming under his palm like a second heartbeat. They sat like that for a long time. The sun moved across the sky. The shadows lengthened. The cold crept back in around the edges, patient as always. Footsteps. He looked up. The old man was walking along the tree line, an axe resting over one shoulder. He'd come by 3 more times since that first morning, never staying long, never saying much, just checking, making sure the smoke was still rising, making sure the boy was still there. He stopped when he reached the edge of the clearing, looked at the boy on the porch, at the dog with its head in his lap. Their eyes met across the distance. The old man nodded. Once, slow, the boy nodded back. No words, no need for them, just acknowledgement. One person seeing another, recognizing something that didn't need to be explained. The old man walked on, disappeared into the trees. The sound of his footsteps faded until there was nothing left but wind and the soft rhythm of the dog's breathing. "Yeah," the boy said quietly. "I know." He didn't know what he meant by it. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. He looked around. At the house behind him, small and old, held together with patches and stubbornness and whatever scraps he could find. At the clearing in front, dead grass poking through the snow, slowly coming back to life. At the forest beyond, dark and quiet, full of things that could still hurt him if he wasn't careful. This was his life now. No family waiting somewhere. No town that would welcome him back. No place in the world that had been made for him. Just this. A house nobody wanted. On land nobody cared about. At the edge of a town that had looked right through him like he wasn't there. And a dog that had crawled in to die and decided to live instead. He thought about his father's watch, sold for $5 at a pawn shop that smelled like dust and old regret. He'd traded the last piece of his parents for a door that wouldn't stay closed and walls that let the wind through. But he'd kept something else, something the watch could never have given him. The dog shifted, pressing its head more firmly against his leg. Its eyes were closed now, breath slow and steady, asleep, safe. He'd kept this, not found it, not earned it in any way that made sense, just kept it, stayed when he could have left, helped when he didn't have to, made a choice, over and over, day after day, until the choices became something else, something that felt like belonging. The sun touched the tree line, the light turned orange, then pink, then the gray of early evening. The temperature dropped. He stood carefully, not wanting to wake the dog. It woke anyway, lifted its head, blinked at him, struggled to its feet with that awkward limp. "Come on," he said. "Time to go in." He walked to the door, opened it. Warmth spilled out the fire he'd banked that morning, still glowing in the pit. The dog followed, claws clicking on the planks, tail wagging slowly. Inside, he added wood to the fire, watched the flames climb, felt the heat push back against the cold. The dog circled its spot near the fire, the place he'd cleared for it, padded with old cloth and dried grass. It turned twice, 3 times, then lay down with a grunt. He sat across from it, his back against the wall. His corner, though the whole room felt like his corner now. The fire crackled. The dog breathed. Outside, the wind picked up again, but it couldn't reach them. Not anymore. He looked at the dog. It looked back at him. No words, no sounds, just the 2 of them in this small room, at the end of a day like every other day, and unlike any day that had come before. He wasn't the boy who'd stood on his aunt's porch listening to the lock click shut. Wasn't the kid who'd walk through town invisible to everyone who passed. He was something else now. Someone who stayed. Someone who was needed. The dog's eyes drifted closed. Its breathing deepened. Sleep pulled it under, easy and complete. He watched for a while. The rise and fall of its sides, the twitch of its paws as it dreamed, the scar on its leg, pale against the fur. They'd made it. Both of them. The house was still old. The winter was still long. The world outside was just as cold, just as indifferent, just as ready to forget him as it had always been. But in here, something was different. In here, there was warmth. There was breath. There was a heartbeat that wasn't his own. In here, there was home. He closed his eyes, let the fire's warmth settle into his bones, let the sound of breathing fill the silence. And for the first time since his parents died, he slept without dreaming of locked doors,